Welcome to Freedom Blueprint Podcast. We are hanging out today with Joe Strittmatter. And Joe, welcome, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to be hanging out. It's been a while since we've caught up. I think last year, maybe at Service World or something like that, we connected. I'm excited to kind of dig into a little bit about your story and your journey. I don't know if a lot of people know you or not, but after this, they definitely will. And you've made this really cool transition from, owning a business to selling to private equity to now getting in another industry and, all the things in between. So I'm excited to kind of dig into it. But let's start out with this. How did you get even into the plumbing AC space?
Second generation. Dad started in 1980. Actually started in 79, working for somebody else for a year. He worked for a printing company and they knew they were going to have a bunch of layoffs and they were closing the location. Thankfully enough in advance to where he could go and figure out what he wanted to do, after that. So he put himself through refrigeration school, doing it on the weekends, and went to work for a man in 79 and was helping him out, ended up buying him in 1980. So
a year.
I'm sorry?
So just a year.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I mean, back then it was all pretty simple. There were no boards. There were no, communication issues. It was all just, simple stuff. And so, yeah, and the guy hung around for a couple of years also afterwards to help Dad out with some things. But Dad, did that, and so I just grew up around it. He told me I was 12 when I actually started helping him. I would go and run rafters for him in the summertime, hanging ductwork and doing things of that nature, and just evolved into later me taking it all over in about 2005, and that's what led to this.
So 2005. So you had it for what, 18 years before you sold it? Does that sound right? 17?
Yes, but the first 5-6 years, roughly, all I did was construction. Didn't bother with service at all. Just did new construction. In '09, I was up to 5 crews coming in each day, doing one or sometimes 2 systems each that day. And, of course, what happened in '09. So I made a knee-jerk reaction and I joined a franchise. I won't say the name of it. But I was with that franchise, I think, a total of 6 months. 3 months in, I realized who was going to make all the money. And and I ended up selling it off to somebody that owned the territory right beside us, thankfully. And that's when I read Ron Smith's book, HVAC Spells Wealth. And
Great book.
At the end of the book, he's talking about Matt Michelle, and Comanche Marketing along with Service Roundtable. And, I reached out to them, figured out, heck, they're the next town over. I didn't even know it. Denton and Louisville, I mean, we're 15 minutes apart, and that's where they were based out of. So ended up joining Service Roundtable, was with that portion for about 6 months till Charlotte Carson was her name. She's no longer with them, but she kept reaching out, trying to get me to join the alliance, and I ended up joining the alliance. And I think 2013, I was 1 year after the inaugural year joining the alliance, and fast forward to now, here we are.
So during that period of time, what did the business look like when you took it over, and what did it look like when you exited?
Well, when I took it over, it was zero revenue. Dad had all but shut it down. So coming out of high school, he asked me if I was going to take it over. No, I'm gonna go play
You're like,
football
no.
somewhere. Who wants to be an AC guy? You know. Well, got hurt, so football went away. Ended up working. His friend, a friend of his, had started a supply house and ended up with 19 locations when he sold it to Watsco. But I went to work for his friend out of high school and kind of learning some ins and outs of it. I worked there 3 or 4 years. Came back to dad and was like, okay, let's do this. And he told me, no, you had your chance. Um, Go out here, work for other people. And this was back when there wasn't necessarily a Service Nation or a Nexstar or anything of that nature. There was a RSES division here, but that was the only best practices that there was. And so he's like, go to work for other people, figure it out if they've figured out a better will than I have, or if they're just doing things the way they do it because that's all they know to do, and they'll get you a good experience seeing how other people run businesses. And so I bounced around for the next 4 to 5 years, working for some of his friends and for some others. And when I came back to him, I said, hey, did I prove myself to you yet? And he's like, yep, here's my license. Good luck. So that's why I
Sink or
reverted back
swim,
to
damn it. Sink or
construction.
swim.
Yeah, that's why I reverted back to construction because I didn't have any money to market. I didn't have
Right.
any money to get into construction. I was literally, the internet was just coming out. We had the internet at our house, Tanya and I's house, but we didn't have a printer. So I didn't have the gas money to drive around and try to talk to builders. So I would go over to my parents' house, use their printer to print off letters that I then mailed to builders to try to get work. And that's how I got my first 3 builders, was mailing letters out to builders offering a low price install.
Guerrilla marketing works.
It does.
I
It does.
think that's a cool story to share, because I think a lot of times, especially now, we're so reliant on the Google monster and all the digital things that we forget a lot of times that we're still in the human connection business, and sometimes it just takes knocking on a door and getting outside your comfort zone and maybe popping in on a builder, or if you don't
Yeah.
have gas money, borrowing somebody's printer and borrowing a stamp and kicking it out. Listen, letters still work. I think people are like, you can't send letters. They don't work. They do work. And it's because most people don't do them or don't do them correctly. But
They're unique now.
right.
It used to be the norm, kind of like the Yellow Pages.
Yep.
Now it's niche or unique, and you can still. It's actually probably working better now because not everybody's flooding it.
Right. Yeah. And I'm talking about like there's letters and then there's postcards, and I'm talking about two different things, but
Yeah.
both still work. But again, you have to have a strategy with each of them. So you got the business, took it over, got the builders. What made you decide that, hey, the building thing is not for me? I need to jump into service, or how did that even come up? And how did you even think about that?
Well, the housing crisis of 2009 forced me. When you go, I had got it up to $2.5 million in revenue, and the next year I did 450. So I didn't have much choice. I mean, when there's no building going on, you can't do anything.
Right.
And so like that's why the knee jerk, those franchise people called me. It's like, hey, we're selling a franchise in your area. Get into service. And I'm like, yes, this is what I need, because I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And I learned some really good things there. It wasn't all for naught. Um, some systems and process things, and met some really cool people that I still know that are in the industry. But I realized I wasn't going to be making the kind of money I thought I was going to be making, because by the time you pay royalties and marketing fees and this program and that program and whatnot, I wasn't going to be. I was going to be making about 25% of the profits. And so I was like, yeah, this ain't for
Yeah,
me.
not 25% profit, 25% of the profit.
Correct. Correct. So I sold it for a loss, even though I didn't have the money to lose. But it's probably the best thing I'd have did.
Yeah. Well, and for anybody listening too, think about that. Like, so you hit this guerrilla marketing, no money, nothing other than determination and aspirations. Like, let's go get it. And then '08 hits, and any of us in business in '08, like, it was a weird time, and everybody was kind of like, I can remember calling banks being like, I got these trucks, like, you want to come get them? You want me to bring them to you? Like, what's this going to look like? I mean, I don't know. But those of us who made it out of that, man, there were some really cool lessons that were learned coming through that transition out of the other end of it, which I don't know, maybe that's a blessing of age, like, okay, well, we've been through that before. And I feel like a lot of times when people are talking about economy now, I don't think quite as nervously about it as I did back in the day, because there wasn't a whole lot of diversity we had going on. And I think you guys were the same way because you were focused on the builder side. So, okay. So you go from that to the necessity of the service side. And then you guys sold, what year did you guys sell?
21.
Okay. So 21. Staff size, revenue. Where were you guys roughly?
12.5 million, 30 staff.
Okay. So that's pretty impressive numbers per person.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of growth to happen in let's be honest, that's a pretty short period of time.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, like, I grew to $50 bajillion in 4 minutes, and you can too. But realistically, there's sustainable growth, and I think that's what you guys had going on.
Yeah, I never really focused on the big number, right?
Right.
That I had some really good mentors early on that guided me towards the net profits. And in my first Service World Expo event, they pulled me aside and were like, "Listen, you're going to hear all sorts of things here. You're going to hear people talking about how much revenue they do. And everybody's, especially the people that are doing big revenue, are happy to share that with you.
Mm-hmm.
Ask them what their nets are." And that was my driver. It wasn't, I want to be the best at whatever it is that I do, but my definition of being the best is different, and that guided me to the net profits. And so I want to be as profitable, more profitable than anybody. And so there were years, we hit 22, 23% net. I only know 3 other people who have ever had a higher net profit than I had, and legitimately know that they did that. And that's Jason Henderson, Lou Habaika, and Billy Stevens. And that's the realm I want to play in, because I talk to plenty of these 40, 50, $60 million a year companies that didn't make the nets that we were making at 12 and a half.
Yeah.
But they have a way bigger circus. And so I steered clear of that.
Well, and at the end of the day, what's the point? Like, I mean, realistically, in our industry, which is sad, most businesses are single digit. Like, there's so much risk that people are putting in, risk of their financial security, their livelihood in single digits. What's the point? But no, I think you're dead on it. And the people that you named, yes, I mean, that's the when I think of OGs and I think of guys that you really want to mirror, that's exactly the list that comes up, not the ones that are 100 million. And, but yeah, what a great group of people to be tied to.
Been fortunate to know those guys. Very
Yeah.
fortunate.
And what's also cool is they're all so willing to share.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're willing to share, but then it's a matter of, are people listening? Are they paying attention? Are they executing? Because that's really the difference between, like you said, if you're getting into that 20+% profit number in the single, is typically it comes down to execution. Like, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. There is no mystical, magical silver bullet. And that's the thing that
Great point.
everybody is searching for, is that silver bullet. And there's not a silver bullet out there. I mean, I've watched people jump from organization to organization. I've watched them jump from this mentor to that mentor to this idea to that idea. And it has nothing to do with any of that. It's do you want to do the dang work or not? And that's where it's at is, you have to develop these systems and processes and follow them. But more importantly, you have to have a way of tracking and testing them. And if you're not doing that and making that somebody's responsibility, then you're never going to get to that level.
Yeah, great point. There's not an easy button.
Mm-mm.
It's do the work. And I think, that's part of the challenge, not part of the challenge, but I think typically when people join a franchise group, in their head, you can validate this if this was you or not, but you're like, oh, well, great. They're going to hand me everything I need to be successful.
Yes.
And the truth is, when you're thinking about your business and your systems and your processes, they have to be you. Like you have to, you're like, oh yeah, there's a book over there that tells me all the things. Well, that doesn't do you any good. You have to actually know how to do it. And then you have to train it. And then you have to train it. And then you have to train it again. And then you got to follow up on it. And you got to train some more on it. But yeah, to your point, there's not an easy button. And man, this is just a hard industry. It's a hard business that we're in. However many trucks you have is how many brands you have out there. And I mean, there's just, they're moving targets for ambulance chasers to go, bump into you and, oh, my neck and my back. There's so much of that. It's just a hard industry. But to your point, there's no easy button. You just have to do the work and you have to execute.
Absolutely. And the one book, one thing that gave me the most guidance was Traction by Gino Wickman. I've now read Traction 7 times, and I've read just about everything that Gino's put out, from Rocket Fuel to Entrepreneurial Leap to what the heck is EOS to all of it. And the reason why I prefer that one is it tells you that you need these systems and processes, but then he tells you how to do it.
Right.
And so that's what I like the most about that book. And it helped me tremendously. We were growing 30% year over year, every year. Was twice named by Inc. 5000 as one of the fastest growing, privately held companies in the nation. Won all sorts of awards. And 2019, I was flat. The first half of the year, I was flat. And I'm looking at it like, what just happened? It took me 6 months. I'm a slow learner sometimes, but it took me 6 months to realize what had happened. One was the introduction of Google LSA, local service ads. But the second thing was it had grown big enough for me to micromanage, and we couldn't get any bigger than that. I was the bottleneck.
You were the lid. Yep.
And I had to get out of my own way and allow my people to start doing their jobs.
So to your point, I think people miss this sometimes, is leadership is not one thing, right? It's not like one bucket, one thing. And the truth is the skill set as a leader and an owner for a $1 million company looks different than a 5 million, looks different than a 10 million, looks different than a 50 million. And it's all part of this growth process that happens. And I think sometimes people get jammed up on that because they think like it's one bucket. No, it's not one bucket, man. You got to, as your business grows, so do you. Like you have to learn, you have to elevate. And I think that's why you were so successful, as you were growing with it and able to kind of go, I'm kind of the problem. I need to fix that. Where most owners don't do that. They keep their grubby paws on everything. And then what happens is it stifles the growth, and then nothing happens. And then at that point, the business either doesn't do anything for years and years, or it starts to backtrack.
Absolutely. You know, we sold and we took on another brand also. And when I left, I had 120 employees. There's no way I can manage 120 employees by myself. You know, so I had to lean on, and I even took on some new management from the other company that I had to teach and train how to manage, because they hadn't been given that responsibility by their prior GM either. They were micromanaged by their, you know, and so they were scared to make these decisions. And I'm like, you've got to make them.
Yeah.
Right or
Make
wrong,
a decision.
you got to make it. Now I'm here to make sure it's not too bad of a decision, but I've got to allow you to fail on a certain scale also, or else you're never going to learn why you don't go this route, you go this route.
Yeah, I think once you get to a certain point, you have to be okay with, like, you're not managing, like, you don't care how the watch is made, you care how it works. So what you're doing from a leadership standpoint is you're managing the outcome, not the everyday minutia of whatever's happening and going
Correct.
on. And man, I can remember going through that process. That was tough.
It is.
Because it was like, but I can do it better. Well, okay, maybe, but there's only one of you.
Right.
And you can't grow if you're the one doing all that one thing. So you got to get out of the way. Trust your people.
Yeah, Ken Goodrich and I had a conversation about this once, and he told me, he's like, man, you got to find people that are better than you at these positions.
Yep.
And hire them. You just got to be able to manage people that are smarter than you.
Give them a
Okay.
task and get out of their way.
Yep.
That's fantastic. So let's shift gears a little bit. So you sold the business, you stayed on a little bit, grew it, and then exited that business. After you sold and you kind of went through this, we'll call it somewhat retirement. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
How did that go? Like, what did you do with your time? Like, you're used to getting up early and doing this thing, and then all of a sudden you're like, what do I do with my hands? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, the first month or two was a very big culture shock. You know, for years and years, getting up at 5 each morning and having to be somewhere, and, you know, even getting up that early on the weekends. You know, it's a major shock to the system, and it takes some adapting to. You know, when you're goal driven and now you have no goals, you start trying to figure things out, and you start forcing things, you know, like I did a whole bunch of real estate and still am. And, you know, my wife, she got on to me the other day about some real estate that I bought. And she goes, you would have never have bought that if you didn't have a pocket full of money to buy it with. And I'm like, you're right. She's
Investments
absolutely
look
right.
different when you're not broke.
Yeah. But but I was so bored, I needed something to do. And so, we've played this game for a while, and built a great big old shop. We went and spent time over in Europe. We've been here, we've been there, and it's not who I am. It's not how I'm built. And actually, I got my old shop back here about 3 weeks ago, and I mean, it was the best thing since Christmas. Even though I don't have a whole lot to do, I'm at the shop by 6:30 in the morning. I mean, I got a TV right here that I'm watching all my CNBC reports on in the morning, right here on my desk, and it's like I've been given some purpose back, and it's exhilarating. Um, I was sleeping 10 hours because there's no alarm set, there's nothing to go do, there's no whatever, and sometimes even 11 hours a day, and I wasn't clinically diagnosed, but I was probably at some form of depression because I'm a goal driven person, and that was all taken away from me whenever I retired. And so looking back, I don't know if I'd have done it so early, but
Well, and it's so so we had an episode for those of you listening, there's an episode with Cristiano from Rhino, and we talked about this kind of the same topic. And what's interesting is I went through the same thing, right? When I sold the other plumbing business, I sold it, and it was kind of like this weird, what do you do? And everybody feels their time different. Like we did real estate, which we've done real estate for years, but the trick with real estate is it's kind of that one transaction, and then either the next transaction is you sell it or you have a renter, and like there's not a whole lot of in between. And I can remember one of the things, like when we sold the other business, first of all, we were like, not doing that again. We're like, yep, check that off the box, not doing that again, which obviously we did do it again.
right.
But man, the thing that I missed the absolute most out of all of that was the people. Man, I missed helping people get from like kind of a lost confused, because that's part of the deal with the trades is you get people in that kind of think they don't have any other option or whatever, which is not the case. The trade should be looked at totally different than that, but then to take them and then have these people and show them a path for them to grow and prosper and buy homes and support their family. And I completely underestimated how much of that I missed. And ultimately that's why we ended up doing another business again, was because I was struggling with that. Just like you, like I was sleeping too much. I was drinking too much. I was spending too much time on the boat. Bought a big boat. There's all these things because at some point you're like, well, I got to find something to do with my time. And a bored entrepreneur is probably one of the worst things you could do, to not have a goal set every single day.
Yeah.
Like even getting up and working out in the mornings was a challenge, because you're like,
I can do it now. I can do it at 5 o'clock tonight.
later,
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
11. And then you're like, well, I'll do it at like 2 this afternoon. And then you go to lunch. You're like, I'm just going to have this one beer and 2, and I'm not going to work out now. And next thing you know, you're like, shit, it's been 6 weeks since I've worked out, and now I'm in trouble, and I've put on 50 pounds. So
Yeah, I actually built, like I said, a big shop at the house, and I built a massive gym inside of it. I've got wet sauna, dry sauna, full all-in-one workout machines, all the free weights in the world. I got a assault bike. I've got a stair climber, 2 treadmills,
do you have a
and
cold plunge?
I don't have the cold plunge yet. Andy Habike is on me about that too,
Yeah.
but I don't have the cold plunge yet. But it wasn't getting used until I started going back to work.
Right. Routine and habit.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome. So, all right. So now, you've gone to business, you've sold it, You were in this semi-retired spot. What does it all look like now for Joe? What's on the horizon for you?
So I mentioned Jason Henderson earlier.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I were supposed to have gone on our first supposed trip to Argentina, and we canceled it because it was raining. We just canceled the one I'm supposed to be at right now because it's raining there the whole time. And we decided, you know what, we're going to go to Vegas and we're going to go see this concert. And, Jason and I are friends and we're friends on Facebook. And I saw that he was starting a garage door company. And I was like, well, while
Which,
I'm out
real
in
quick,
Vegas,
before we go past that, Jason had a business in
Vegas. Mm-hmm.
Grew it to be a pretty good sized business, sold it, exited. I think probably fell on that board entrepreneur for a minute as well.
Absolutely.
And then now he's ramping up some garage door stuff. Is that accurate?
Correct. And so it was pre-revenue when I went out there and was talking to Jason, went by his shop and was looking at things, and I'd already kicked around garage doors or maybe roofs or, something of that nature, and was getting some intel from him. And so I went straight back to the hotel room and I'm jotting down a whole business model on garage doors, to the point I'd already bought the URL. I mean, within an hour of me leaving, I probably got it written down over here somewhere. I don't even remember what the heck I was going to call it. It's like Texas Garage Door Repair or something. I bought the URL and I was coming up with a business model, and I'm messaging my old marketing director, Casey. He's like, all right, I'm going to get into garage doors. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. I already got the wrap envisioned in my head. It's going to be a Texas flag with, all this stuff. And Jason the next day calls me. He's like, hey, why don't we partner up on this and do something? I'm like, I like the sound of that. Like, you've already had the brand made, you paid Dan Antonelli, you got the website done, you've done all these things. And it's like, well, it'd be much quicker and easier for me to start up. And that's the one thing I learned from private equity. The first thing was I learned a lot of what not to do. And the second thing was I learned how this consolidation and people joining forces can really expedite things.
Yeah.
And so when Jason reached out, I'd already envisioned when my non-compete's up, coming up with something, because we have so many friends in the industry that are coming out of their non-competes around the same time as me. I was like, why don't we just put something nationwide together and have these synergies, and we can all scale much faster in the future. And so when Jason approached me, that's what I was thinking about with the garage doors. And so it was a no-brainer for me to say, hey, yeah, man, let's jump in. Because again, anybody that's sold to private equity and spent any time with them, like I was regional president. And so I got to see a lot of things and talk to a lot of other people on how they run their operations and peek behind the curtain some. And I can see, I've been at the negotiating table with different vendors. And when you walk in and say, yeah, I do $5 million a year, and you walk in and say, hey, I do $100 million a year, that's two different,
little bit different
conversations.
Leverage. Yeah.
And so, once somebody hears, hey, we have 5 locations opening up, there's a different tone that comes out of it.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I was like, yeah, that's a no-brainer for me to, join forces with them.
Very cool. So, so have you launched yet in Texas? What is that going to look like? Or I don't even know if that's something you can talk about yet. If not,
no, I can. We are waiting on Google verification to happen for ads and things of that nature. Um, that has completely changed since the last time I had to do something of this nature. And it's not a, hey, we'll have it done tomorrow sort of process anymore.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
about a 3 month process. So we, our rule of thumb is we won't go to market until that's done. So I'm not hiring anybody. I'm not doing, we're just getting, we've already got trade accounts, we've got uniforms, we got wraps, we got trucks built out, we've got everything ready to go. And actually, we did open up an Indeed ad, and I have a pipeline of people already coming in wanting to be employed. I'm just we're just going to pause it until we're ready to start swinging.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, you know what would be really cool is if we could have you back on in a couple of months
Yeah,
and just kind of check in on how's it going. Because one of the things that I believe is that when you open up this garage door, it is not going to take you but probably 24 months to surpass the numbers you were doing in your HVAC business. That's my belief. And it's because you're gonna deploy the things that you already know,
yeah,
and it's just gonna go that much faster. I think the mindset's different. I think that's the difference between. So we talk a lot about the other company we had was 1.0, and the new company we had was 2.0, and we scaled 2.0 faster than 1.0 just because we deployed the same things. We already had the systems, the process, like all that stuff was done. So your learning curve is going to be um, much shorter. But that would be amazing if you check back in with us in a couple months, and if we can be
absolutely,
a part of that journey with you, because I think it's pretty amazing, and I think that you
absolutely,
guys are going to crush it.
yeah. No, I think the platform as a whole, um, because there are so many good operators like yourself that are sitting on the sidelines that are bored. And, if that's who we're partnering with nationwide
Yeah.
is people who have been good operators in the past that don't need a lot of hand holding. And, we're literally getting everything down to a science with these three that we're onboarding now to week one, do this, week two, do this, week three, do this, week four, your doors are open and we're ready to go. I mean, we already have all the content and information we can send you and guide you to this person, that person. And, we're greenfielding most of these locations. And so it's a little different experience than, the acquisition route. Uh, the last time I greenfielded something, I didn't have any money. Now that there's
Right.
money to go around, I think you're absolutely right. My goal for the first year from $0, no customer base, is to do $3.5 million the first year in revenue. And I'm shooting for a 30% net.
Well, I have no doubt that you will hit that.
At least somebody believes it.
No doubt. No doubt whatsoever. Um, well, listen, man, I know you got a ton of stuff to do, and you got this giant empire to work on to start building. So, yeah, any last thoughts for the listeners before we jump off?
I know Billy has a saying, you already have enough business within your business, you're just not capitalizing on it or something of that nature. But, success, there was somebody else that said something like success is in the work that you're not doing. And, and I think this next year or two in the home services space is going to be extremely difficult, even more difficult than it has been. And that's because Ben Stark used to always talk to me about a fragmented market. And I never really understood what he meant. What he was talking about was the last roundup with service experts and Blue Dot and things.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it now. I'm not going to name the company, but I know a company that sold to private equity about 3 years ago, and they have now started 5 other companies, meaning 5 of their people have left and started other companies. And I see that a lot of that. I've talked to a lot of friends that are in the PE space, and a lot of the PEs are down 30, 35% year over year. And I think that's part of the reason why is there's so many more operators out there in the market right now that there's, one size pie that is being split, divided up more ways. And if we hit this recession that it looks like could be coming, that pie is going to shrink. So if I was in business right now, I would be doing away. If I was a smaller company in business, I'd be doing away with all my debt that I could possibly get rid of and get ready for some lean times, because I've got a feeling the next year or two could be that until some of these companies start shutting their doors. And that's why I'm not eager to get back into the space right now, because I think it's just going to be an absolute fight for the next year or two. And I'll let everybody else duke it out, and I'll come waltzing back in.
Once the dust starts to settle a little bit, come
Yeah.
back in and roll.
Yeah.
Joe, man, I appreciate you coming and hanging out. I think that's always good wisdom. I think, to your point, you should run lean as a business anyways, because in order to hit the numbers that you want to hit, you got to be lean. So I think that's great advice, and I hope everybody listening takes note on that a little bit. But Joe, appreciate you coming and hanging out, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.